is my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender of my planet.
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and the name of our show is Sharing Their Stories, Illinois Sudanese Community. And as my guest, I have Manuel Awak, President of the Sudanese Community Association of Illinois, and I have Peter Maigai Bull, Assistant Secretary of the Sudanese Community Association of Illinois. I have John Dul Kual, Treasurer of the Chicago Association for the Lost Boys of Sudan, and I have Sean Tenner, Board of Director of the Sudanese Community Association of Illinois. I'm glad that you're on my show, and we're going to talk about Sudan, because in last Sunday's paper, they list the world's 10 worst dictators, and the second one was the dictator of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir. He was considered the #2 worst dictator in the world. And so I'm glad we're going to talk about your country. And when did the conflict in Sudan start and why?
First of all, Mr. Frank, let me say thank you for having us on your show. The conflict actually started in Sudan in two phases. The first one, soon we got independent from Great Britain in 1956. The First War broke out, and that one lasted for 17 years. The second wave of the war started in 1983 and ended in 2005, led to what we call the comprehensive agreement between the North and the South. The reason the war started, both conflict in 1956 and in 1983, respectively, it was based on economic marginalization. People in the southern Sudan, we believe we are marginalized, Nuba Mountain and Darfurian, and of course in the eastern Sudan. But that is the one element. What made it a bit more complicated and difficult is the concept of Islamization. The people from northern Sudan, majority of them are Christian, and of course the people in northern Sudan are Muslim. Basically, when the people from southern Sudan took up arms to fight a repressive government in Khartoum, what we call the elite, that government controlled by a few people, it was to make sure that the system benefit everybody, which is imply that they were fighting for justice and equality for all. So we're fighting an oppressive regime that will oppress its own people. So the last conflict lasted in 2005 in January, and that was led between the southern Sudan and the northern Sudan. And before even the war between the north and the south ended, there was just another war in western Darfur, and that I think we're going to talk about it later. But that is the basically, it's a marginalization and also the concept of Arabization.
I see, and that's what started the war, and before that, Britain used to rule the country.
Yes, the Sudan was controlled by Britain, and in fact it was very unique. Sudan was unique, it was colonized through Egypt. They used to call Anglican Egyptian rule. So it's basically, in say for Great Britain was colonizing Sudan directly. It used Egypt to control Sudan. Oh. And that is when they left. There was that vacuum. So the people who were in northern Sudan would look pro-Arab from Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
They lived in the power. So it was, a divide and rule approach.
I see.
And that sentiment led in the country until even the present.
Now, do they all speak the same language in Sudan?
Sudan is a multi-ethnic country, over 115 tribes and various languages.
Oh, various languages.
Yeah,
and that's what also caused a problem too then, probably.
That is because when the British left, they have that concept of divide and rule. There are some tribes were fed against another tribe.
Yes.
So tribal conflict will become a tool of the central government, what we call a government in the north, to use against other tribe to say, okay, you are better than another one,
Yes.
you are better than another. So it took a toll, not only in the southern Sudan, but currently what is going on in Darfur.
Now, why did President Omar al-Bashir crack down so brutally in 2003, Peter?
Well, just to take it from where Malwal actually left it, one of the Sudanese government concept that which they have applied in the South and now in Darfur, where there's ongoing genocide, is that the concept has been always to get rid of the African population wherever they are. So in Darfur, now you have the movement, Darfur movement, rebel against the government, and so the aim was just to get rid of the African population, just the Africans. So they were using Janjaweed to get rid of them in Darfur. And one of the reasons they did so was, they, of course, their objective had been, to get rid of people from the land so that if they want to bring the Arab from the neighboring countries and have them settle in Darfur land, then that was one of the reasons they did. And then there were many other reasons that, any of these gentlemen would add later. But that's what they are even doing even today, as we talk today. That's what they are doing. So you have a situation now where millions of Darfur refugees are only now stationed in refugees camp, and those who are in refugees camp within Sudan and some even within Chad and from other neighboring countries. And that was the same thing with our situation in the South, when majority of the lost boys and thousands of Sudanese refugees were displaced. It was the same method that the government was actually using.
Now, how many people did they move out from Darfur?
Well, we talk about now you have about 2.5 million in the refugees camp.
2.5 million?
Yeah, in the refugees camp. And then, you have other million of refugees camp in outside Sudan, which is in Chad.
And so what are the difference, and you mentioned some of it, but what are the difference between northern and southern Sudan? John?
Once more again, thank you, Frank. And actually, to go direct to the point, what are the difference? There is not really actually that big difference. The Sudan, or the people of the Sudan, they are all Sudanese. The difference is that if the government of the northern Sudan, which has mostly people who are living in the north, who are mainly Muslim,
yes,
that they were putting what is called the operation to operate the southerners, that in the term of what I can say, what is called the banking concept of education, that they are saying that the South are not capable of ruling themselves. They are not capable to do anything that a human being can do. And so they were putting inequality against the South. So another difference is that they were just coming with what is called Sharia law. And actually that came up when the government in the North just tell out that in 1983 that Sudan has become the Islamic country. But not really. Sudan is not an Islamic country. In the South, there are Christians, and the Christians are like more, with the more number from the Muslim. So they had been using this so that the Islamic country can come and help them to wage the war against the South, and also to deny the South their religion, that the freedom of religions, that everybody have to be free from the religion when it comes to the government ruling. So they have been using this to fight the South. And actually when the peace came, to back up what Malwal said, when the peace came in 2005 between the North and the South, that's when they look into it, the peace was coming, so they turned themselves to fight Darfur. If it was because of the religions, why did they fight Darfur? And Darfur, they are Muslim. The thing is that the difference is the Arab and the black African. That's what the difference is. And the resources coming to the economic. Sudan is really a resourceful country where there's oil in there, and the oil is located in the South. And for them to give the South freedom of religions and the government, then they're looking into it that the power will be shared again, and they don't want that. That's what I can say. Basically, that's a difference.
I see. And are there any colleges or universities in the South?
Oh, yes. Before the war, there was like university in Juba, but they were not really well built academically. Everything was built in the North, and that's what it was. So when you are just when they used to look at if you are a Southerner, a Christian, basically,
yes,
and you have that mentality, you want to get the high quality of education, then they will dismiss you and tell you that there is no another high level of education, because they look into it. If you learn more to be productive, then you will know the history of Sudan, and you will turn against them telling the people what are their rights.
Now, when and why did the conflict start in Darfur, Sudan, western region?
Well, the conflict in Darfur started in approximately 2003, and there are a number of reasons for the violence that we've seen in the Sudan, but you have to look at the fact that Omar al-Bashir, the president of the country, is now an indicted war criminal. He's waged a reign of terror not just in Darfur, but in the south of his country as well. And he has engaged in a campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide, regardless of how you define the word, in Darfur. Beginning in 2003, he armed the Janjaweed militias, which are Arab militias that ride on horseback and terrorize villages, rape women, and destroy entire populations. He's paid the Janjaweed militias to do his dirty work for him so that the international community could not say these crimes are being committed directly by the Sudanese government. The excuse that President al-Bashir used was that rebellion had broken out in Darfur. And while this is true, the people of Darfur had rebelled against the oppression, the lack of schools, the lack of resources, the lack of housing. The response of genocide was certainly disproportionate to the rebellion that was being waged against the government. So they came in and they set about the extermination of an entire people. Right now, the best estimates we have are that over 400,000 people have been killed in the genocide in Darfur, and now over 2 million people are almost entirely dependent on international aid for survival. When the International Criminal Court found President Bashir to be a war criminal just this past week, he responded by yanking all of the permits for international aid agencies to operate in Darfur, which means millions of people in the camps now have no access to food, no access to water, no access to medicine. So you're going to see that 400,000 person death toll climb dramatically over the next several months if action isn't taken by the international community.
Now, was it in the paper a week ago or 2 weeks ago where they went and kidnapped 3 doctors from Sudan?
Yeah, because actually the Bashir government, by using Janjaweed in Darfur, that is not something that new. Even the first war in the southern Sudan, they were using what they call Arab Mujahideen, what they call the oil war.
Now, now, what country do they come from?
They are Sudanese.
Sudanese?
But, yes, but the mentality is a system built for them to believe they are superior than the people in the south.
Yes.
They are superior than the people in the western region of Darfur. They are superior than the people in Angasna, which we call a Blue Nile, and Nuba Mountain. And it's that concept, you know, that is why the government authorized them, you know, to do a that work on their behalf. And what they get, you know, either what they collect from the population and their properties, that is actually their ultimate pay.
And that's why the Khartoum government wants to rid southern Sudan and Darfur of the native people then, right?
But it goes back like what we talked earlier. Let me just go back a little bit. Sudan is the largest country in Africa in terms of its square mile.
The largest country
the
in
largest
Africa?
in Africa in terms of its
Sudan?
square mile. You have 53 countries in Africa, and Sudan is the largest.
Sherry, could we bring the map up again on Africa so we could show?
Yes, I think, you know, you will see, because if you look...
Okay, here's a map up there.
Yeah. So when you look at Sudan in that map, it's the largest. And
The largest
in Africa, in terms of its square mile, 2.5 million square mile, with a 33 million population.
33 million. Okay.
The northern Sudan is completely like a desert, and the southern Sudan is just like a forest land, and where you can get wild animals. And at the same time, that where we have oil discovery. So when you look, the war has been compounded in the different elements. When oil was discovered, the people thought that, you know, that was going to elevate the economic situation, but in fact...
Of the whole country.
The whole country.
Yeah, the whole
but
country.
in fact, the oil is the fuel of the war. Is what even made Bashir to survive, since he took over through the coup in 1989. In fact, he overthrown elected government in 1989 and installed himself as the president. So the chunk of the oil money coming in, it's safe for him to use it to do the school and build, you know, hospital. In fact, he's buying arms from China. And China, as we know, is one of the 5 permanent Security Council members, but it's one of the largest, you know, Sudan oil export.
I see. And who's running the oil industry in Sudan? Is there another country running it for?
Yeah, there are a lot of oil consortium. One is run by the Sudanese oil industry, the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and of course they have other partners from Malaysia, India, and China as well.
So because of the religious problem that is causing this problem, and also the oil,
Yep.
Those two things.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, Sean, that he's been indicted or by the and I picked up an article in the Sunday paper saying that the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for al-Bashir. How enforceable is that?
Well, Omar al-Bashir can be arrested anytime he leaves Sudanese space. And the thinking is that at some point he will try to test the will of the international community by traveling to a conference in Qatar.
Yeah.
But until that time, there's really no way for the international community to get into Sudan to take him because he's protected by his bodyguards and his police service and his military. But sooner or later, we're going to see a showdown where President al-Bashir travels outside of his borders, and we see how much teeth this International Criminal Court really has. And I think those who have been the victims of human rights violations, not just in Sudan, but across the world, are hoping that President al-Bashir is finally brought to justice one way or another.
Yes, because in the article, it mentioned that they accused of driving 2.7 million people from their home since 2003. 2.7. That's a lot of people. And also, I've been reading the articles about the Lost Boys of Sudan. Now, Peter, can you talk about the Lost Boys of Sudan?
Well, yeah, just to start where Malwa left it before, like when the war actually started in 1983, then that war actually reached us in the south. And so in 1986, 87, 88, all our villages, just like it's happening in Darfur now, were attacked by the Sudanese government. And as a result, thousands of children were displaced from different villages. I, being one of those lost boys, left Sudan when I was 6 years old. That was in 1988. I was displaced.
And there's a picture.
Right.
And it looks like, what, thousands of lost boys?
Yeah, well, there was thousands of lost boys that were displaced from different villages. I was displaced with my mom, and our journey began. I worked with her for 6 days, and her leg was swollen that she could, walk anymore. And so, luckily, she was put back in the truck and was taken back home. And then thousands of us began working in the desert. We used to work at night because if we work at day, the government would come and bomb us, and so it was secure to work at night. But working at night too, and these were just children at age 6, age 5, up to 10. It was just so a different history. There was no water too, so working at day when it is sunny, was just another problem. So working at night became convenient for thousands of children. But working at night was the problem too, because majority of children who give up, would just, go to the grass, and if no one has seen them, then that's the end of their life. So, but anyway, thousands of us worked to Ethiopia,
and that's
and we end up in a refugees camp.
Now you were 6 years old.
Yeah.
So you're talking all ages, maybe 4 years old, 6, and
right.
So the older boys had to take care of the younger boys.
Oh yeah, what we used to do, if you are bigger in the group, then you have to take care of the rest, and that's the way we have been. Actually, we've been supportive to one another. When we were in Ethiopia, if I'm taller in the group, then people would choose me and say, hey, Peter, can you take care of 100 or 500 or these 1,000 children? And one of our roles when we were in a refugees camp was like, you have to divide them into a smaller group and assign them some role. For example, we have a situation we lost 100 children each day, then you have to look within the group who could go and bury those kids.
Yes.
Although it's something that kid would not do, but we didn't have, we didn't have choice. And you have to send some to the forest to go and collect wild fruit because there was no food, which were poisoning to many of the children too. But we just eat whatever we got anyway. And then some would have to cook for the group. So different duties were assigned to different people based on the situation that we were exposed to. So we had a situation where about 27 children end up in Ethiopia those years. and then we're in Ethiopia for 4 years.
Now this slide here, could you explain this, Peter? What's the slide on the screen right now?
Well, that was when we walk in the desert. We just walk in group, and that was our journey. Actually, we walked about 1,000 miles to Ethiopia, and so
1,000 miles.
Yeah,
and you were 6 years old.
Oh yes, and well, when you had about almost half of the 27,000 they died from this journey.
And so what does this represent on the screen right now? Looks like bones, right?
Yeah, actually that's like a bone of people who die in the desert. And so when these young people were working, and actually the oldest, like myself at that particular time,
Yes.
I was like 10 years old. So the only thing that if one of the young boy die there in the desert, and you know that there's no water and you cannot help, so you have to leave them. So you don't even look at how to bury them. So those actually, that picture was actually the bone of somebody who died in the desert when we were just walking, crossing the Sahara Desert. On Second Street, when we were going to Ethiopia, we were also attacked. If we work at night, during the day actually, Sudan government have to send the airplane, the antelope, and when they saw young people working, then they start bombing us. So it was better that to work at night, as Peter said.
So
And
boy, so the same government, Bashir, was attacking little kids.
Yes.
Because
Unbelievable.
The rationale behind it is that they have seen the resistance,
Yeah.
and these kids are going to grow up.
Yes.
So, and when they realize that their parents they were killed by this government, of course they're going to stand up and fight. So the idea is to eliminate the potential capability to come in the near future. So killing their parents and killing them, it will give them an upper hand in the long run, that they will completely accomplish their goal. And their goal is that to drive away people from home and get the land. So basically the government was not even interested on the people, who was interested on the land. And if you go back on the war on the southern Sudan, we lost 2.5 million people in the duration of 21-year conflict. 2.5 million. That is the basic statistic. 2.5 million.
You lost
people
2.5 million.
And now on the current situation of Darfur is almost 500,000.
Oh.
Our war here, and that's why we engage in this intensive debate and advocacy, is that the longer you prolong the war in the western region of Darfur, you're going to have a closer number of in the southern Sudan.
Yeah.
And not only you're going to have only a few lost boys, you're going to have 1,000 of the lost boys along with Sudan. So that's why they're sharing their story, such that the world should act quicker and make sure the individual perpetrator this act, and especially al-Bashir, should face the justice that he had the 9 million.
And and during that period, what did any country help the lost boys? I mean, here we see a government is killing little boys, and did anyone in the whole world try and stop it and help it? I mean, who was trying to bring justice?
Actually, it looked like the war that was started in 1983 between the North and the South. It seemed like the world was like closing their eye, and they don't want to know what is going on. That's my opinion.
Yes.
Because when we end up in Ethiopia in 1987, there was 1,000 of the young men, and there was nothing to eat, as Peter said. A lot of them died, and so there was no put towards starvation. There was no medicals or medicine or such a thing. They were not there. And I still remember, like in 1988, when Frank Walford Virginia came, a congressman came to refugee camp in Ethiopia, Fenyudu. I remember that we were welcoming him, like, welcome, welcome, America, congressman, because it was the first person, and he really cried. I see like a grown person to cry, to see the situation of the young people dying. Yes, Ethiopia were there to welcome us to their country, but in terms of food, there was no enough shelter for us to go, so we used to sleep outside. And when it is during the rain rain on us and the wild animal. And actually in 1991, the government of Sudan had something to do with the Ethiopian government when the government of Magiso al-Mariam was overthrown. So we were forced to go back to Sudan, where we ran away. And the military was behind us, so we were forced to cross the river, which is called River Gilo. At that particular time, the river was overflowed. So a lot of the young men actually drowned, and a lot of them were eaten by crocodile. And when we went back to Sudan border, it was of the interest of Bashir that sending his troop, he knew that the young boy who were in the refugee camp in Ethiopia are forced back to Sudan. So he had to send the troop to come and get us. And actually, he ended up captured some of the lost boy
Yes.
that he captured, and he killed them. And we have to run crossing Sahara Desert coming back to Kenya, where we actually lived there for 9 years until the United States came to say enough is enough. And that's why we were brought to United States to start the new life here.
And just to add a little bit to what John just said, you know, the world has been silent. When we were struggling or end up in this situation for some reason, first of all, one of the reasons was that, as Malwal mentioned it before, you might have a situation, you know, when the government declared that this war about religion, and then you have many of the Arab countries were silent because, you know, most of us Lord Boy were mostly from the south, being from the Christian part of the country. So they didn't have any business to do with it. Second to it was that there was no media attention because the government itself was preventing media from learning what was happening. So that's why you have a situation where 500 kids were dying and you will never see it in the report. Now in Darfur it's a different story because you have about 4,000 lost boys in America. So there's nobody that's going to keep us silent. Of course, we will talk about it. So that's why now there's media attention. We was not there when we were struggling over the country. Most of the African leaders, you have seen it recently, you know, when Bashir was indicted. Now they are speaking out about it. Some of them even talk, you know, why the ICC targeting African leaders. For somebody like myself and many of the lost boys who were born in Africa and has been struggling in that situation, sometimes when you see some of the African leaders, you know, lining themselves up in support of people like Bashir who have been killing thousands of us, then you wonder, did they, when we were dying in Africa, was it that they didn't know the situation we were in? Of course, we were in Ethiopia. Somebody who was the president of Ethiopia didn't know about it. When we ended up in Kakuma refugees camp in Kenya, the president of Kenya didn't know about it. And so do all these African presidents. But, you know, majority of them are dictators, and that's why, you know, they just think about themselves sometimes. You know, if they could not give support to Bashir, maybe it would be somebody turn tomorrow. And those were some of the reasons you see the world was silent about it. And now, you know, it just cannot happen because we have to speak out. We have to tell our history.
Right. Now, what do you want people to do to help Sudan?
In the present situation, what has to be done, and I think that what we personally in our group who are here, we are very grateful for our current President Barack Obama. Last week he had appointed a special envoy for Sudan, such that to be tested and what is going on in the southern west of Darfur. But the basic thing and primary thing need to be done first is to tell Omar al-Bashir that the 13 NGOs who were helping more than 2.5 million people, they have to go back. If that scenario doesn't work, then the Security Council have to give the mandate that we have African peacekeeping force. We down there not doing anything. It's not because they are not willing, but the capacity and technological know-how is not there. So if they do that, then that will be fine. If it doesn't work, then the resolution has to be passed to impose a no-fly zone to give access to international aid workers to rescue those people. Otherwise, they will be in the same path like 2.5 million people who perished during the first war in southern Sudan.
And